Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. Chad Hyams here without Bob Stewart there. Yes, pull out your bingo card. That's the free square in the middle, basically, because he stands me up just enough times. Now, Bob was pulled away for something of priority. Don't worry, I'm not monologuing. You know, if you want me monologuing, you want to check out the Achieve Your Apex podcast that I have as part of the Win, Make, Give podcast network, where I'm taking you through tips, strategies, success stories in my best-selling book, Achieve Your Apex. And they're only 10 minutes. It's not a long monologue. Yet here it's conversational. And with Bob being gone, I have brought us an amazing guest. Before I bring her on, I want to remind you about the Win, Make, Give podcast network. And you can go to winmakegive.com and find all the shows that are in the podcast network right there. It'll give you links to all of them. Some will be your favorites. Some you'll just listen to because, damn, there's good value on that. Some will just be for fun. And then the newest podcast, not necessarily under our umbrella, it's flying on the side, but it's some of our guys, and that's Cardboard Wars. Check out the fun they're talking about with card collecting if you want a place to throw away your well-earned money. That's that. All right, now we're back to all of this, and I want to bring on my guest today, and I love the fact, Bob, I love you, Bob. You know that. I love that you're gone today. And I love that you're gone today because of the conversation I'm going to get to have with our guest today, because it is going to cover some things that, Bob, you need to listen to as though one of our audience members for this one. And it's going to allow me to go in so many different directions with our guest today. I want to welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast, Sarah Lewis Hartley. Sarah, welcome to Win, Make, Give.
Thank you, Chad. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, I set you up with, we're going to go in a whole bunch of ways, yet nobody knows who Sarah Lewis Hartley is. Maybe they do not yet. Would you please, because I will not read this lovely bio sent over, will you please introduce yourself to our audience as you want to be introduced?
Absolutely. As Chad mentioned, I am Sarah Lewis Hartley. I am a mother of two neurodiverse boys. I'm an author, a healthcare marketing and technology executive, and I'm also an ADHD and neurodiversity coach. So I have been around for a while, been able to navigate challenges that are presented with neurodiversity and how really bringing that over into your executive life and your home life and bridging the gap between those to really help calm your nervous system and understand, what that might mean. You might have those scenarios with coworkers or colleagues, or just the never-ending schedules you're trying to meet with your children. And so I'm here today to talk a little bit about that.
Love that. So folks, we're talking health, wealth, leadership, and legacy here at Win, Make, Give. Nowhere do we say business only, right? I love to do these episodes where we kind of go grab someone from outside of necessarily the industries that we're usually in to see the lessons that we can then bring into our industry. And folks, look, you know it. If you are leading people as an entrepreneur, you basically have children, right? And if you are working with clients in a sales industry, you're basically at times dealing with children. So the lessons we're going to learn today are going to help you in your relationships with everybody, whether it's your children, your grandchildren for some of you out there, or whether it's some of those people you're leading, some of those people you're working with. And really, most importantly, what you'll get out of this is you, right? Because a lot of the lessons that Sarah is going to go over with us today are going to help you. She mentioned calm. And folks, we know stress is the number one killer that is out there. When you are under stress, you are finding so many other things wrong with yourself because your body is always tense. So Sarah, you mentioned a word in there, and I don't have my dictionary with me, and Bob probably would have been Googling or looking it up for us. Define for our audience neurodivergent. When you say that, speaking necessarily about your children, yet what does that word actually mean?
Really, in the simplest way to explain it is neurodivergency is your brain works differently. The way that you interpret, whether it's visual cues or sensory surrounding or just conversations that you're having with people, the way that you interpret the world is a bit different. And so there's a full gamut of what is considered neurodiversity. That could be anything from ADHD to autism, sensory processing disorder, dyslexia, dyspraxia, even looking at OCD or Down syndrome. So there's a full gamut of things that fall underneath that neurodiversity umbrella. At the same time, there's also a huge overlap in a lot of those symptoms. So sometimes it can be very difficult to try to figure out what it is exactly. I know many people who, went into the doctor's office and said, "Hey, I'm dealing with anxiety, I'm dealing with depression," and they came out with ADHD medication. So there are things that are that key overlap that makes it very difficult as adults to really decipher what is actually going on or happening to me. And it's really as simple as your brain is functioning differently.
I want to say something, and I don't want this to come across wrong. Doesn't everybody's brain function differently because we all are brought up a little differently, see the world a little differently? So wouldn't you say that everybody's brain functions differently?
Absolutely. And it's on a different type of level. So I'll give you an example. Say that you are a neurotypical person and you are walking into a conference, and you walk in, you see across the way, you see where your booth is, maybe you're a vendor or a presenter, you go say hello to one of your friends, you grab some food, that's just a great day for you. You're networking. A person who has ADHD walks in. They're completely overwhelmed by all of the sounds. They can smell the food. They're hearing that person over there that's, maybe fixing the coffee and cleaning glasses. They are seeing all the bright colors across all the booths. They are seeing an overwhelming amount of people. They notice that person's wearing a pink shirt. They are looking at all of the fine details and becoming completely overwhelmed from a sensory perspective. And anxiety starts to overcome them, and they don't really know exactly where to go. Now, you've probably engaged with someone like this at a conference or a party of some sort. You then start talking to this person, and the person is talking incessantly. They are the one carrying the conversation. They're probably a little bit humorous and funny as well, but they are the ones carrying the vast majority of that, because it's almost this, there's such anxiety that might come with it that they're overcompensating and maybe even oversharing. And if you're connecting on a level, you may have walked out of there and you had a deep connection with this person within a few minutes. So it's more of how the brain has multiple things coming at the same time, and its inability to decipher what's what and how to respond to it.
Okay, so here are my takeaways from that. One, I think I was called typical, and no one's ever called me typical before. What I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just want to get clarity for myself and for somebody in our audience. It sounds like when you're talking about neurodivergent, there's probably some chemical thing necessarily happening, because we do all see the world differently, yet they're getting different signals or something because of an over amount of certain chemical or a lack of a certain chemical or whatever it might be that's going on there. Is it possible, Sarah, to be that way sometimes? Like, is it possible that if I'm eating certain things or drinking certain things, some chemicals will get messed up in my head? Because look, I've been to many a convention, and I'm the guy who's in there and I'm loving it and I'm talking to people and I'm this and that. Yet there are those times where I'll see the guy over there with the coffee and as you said, and all those lights, and there's way too many colors. And is it possible that everybody can experience some of these symptoms at times? There's just certain people, because of maybe a chemical reason, that they are more prone to it, therefore categorized as ADHD or have autism or something that fit the list you gave us earlier.
Let's see. I am not a doctor, but most of the time, that would, whether it's that you just have, even neurodiversity is those who have a high IQ. So if you are gifted in that sense, that's still neurodiversity, and you would have some of those characteristics. So I have not encountered any neurotypical people to where that would happen. The chemical that is missing is dopamine. So, especially for those with the ADHD brain. So that's where that chemical piece comes into play. The lack of dopamine causes you to want to explore things that will give you that dopamine hit. So that might be exercise. That might be having those conversations. That might be certain impulses around eating or drinking or shopping, wherever that might be, because that's all going to give you that dopamine hit, or that scroll through TikTok, whatever it might be, or Instagram. It's going to give you those quick blurps throughout the day. It's not sustainable. On the flip side, someone who is neurodiverse can have some of those experiences that are not as overwhelming, because either they are masking in a way and they've almost become used to it, or they've done things that day to fill their cup to where they're not going to have it to be noticed as much. They're leveraging their actual strategies that they're taught. So whether they have gone and worked out, and now they are in a really great headspace, or they've maybe done some meditation or breathing exercises. There are those simple things that can be done throughout the day that essentially, build your cup up instead of depleting it. On the other hand, if you're really depleted throughout the day, then you're going to be more sensitive to those environments. So, in theory, while I don't know the exact science around it for a neurotypical person, could they just be really stressed and having a rough day, and then, the type of sensory elements are impacting them more so than it would on a normal day? Yes, I imagine that is possible. I don't have that scientific evidence. I really know more about how that feels for a person who is neurodiverse.
Got it. Here's what I got from that. Everybody work out every day. That's what I got from that. And of course, our audience would know that that's all that Chad heard in there. He heard the words workout happen, right? Folks, if you work out, it's all better. That's what I just heard. Okay, Sarah, let's jump into this. You are either about to release or just released, kind of depending when the episode here drops for our listeners, a children's book series. The first book of the children's book series. And folks, I will tell you this. You may not know this. The first book I ever wrote was a children's book. Well before I wrote Achieve Your Apex, I wrote Ketchup Can't Hurt. Some of our listeners have told, they raised their kid reading that book to them and have loved every moment of that. What I found out when writing it, Sarah, is children's book is flat out the hardest category to get into when it comes to books. And yet here you are diving into the children's book industry.
You're correct. It is very difficult. I didn't know the extent that would come from this process that I've started. And I think part of that is having the illustration piece. So if you were to, write an adult book, you're really just looking at the text piece. And that's what I did. I wrote, it was very cathartic for me. It was in a time in my life where I was under a tremendous amount of stress and had just been diagnosed with Lyme disease. My oldest child had been just diagnosed with ADHD and sensory processing disorder and was highly gifted. And so all of that came to this essential tipping point for me, where I then wrote my first book out of having that aha moment in the shower of, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And got out of the shower, wrote that first book. And I didn't know the path that it would lead me to, or even the difficulty of entering into the children's book world. But since have now, I'm working on the 14th right now. 13 are complete. As you mentioned, the ebook should be out this week, which is early October, and then the first book, the actual printed version, will be out in November, and then we'll release one a month from there.
Okay. And if they want to get their hand on the book, which we'll talk about a little bit so they would understand why they might want to get their hand on the book, the best place to get it will be?
You can go to sarahlewishartley.com, and it's SARA. And then follow me on Instagram at Sarah Lewis Hartley for all of the book release updates, various calming strategies. There are many for adults and other parenting handbooks as well.
Okay, sarahlewishartley.com. Save the H for the Hartley, right? It's not on the Sarah part, to make that easy. So it's called the Purposefully Me series. Tell us a little bit about the series, because I think it's something that not only will our audience possibly want to be getting their hands on for their kids or grandkids, yet it might actually be pretty impactful for some of them. Talk about the Purposefully Me series.
So I'm really touching on topics that are not really talked about. I think we're starting to hear more and more and becoming more comfortable with conversations around neurodiversity or bullying or divorce, death, all of those things, and having those conversations with children. But everything that I'm touching on is a difficult topic. And so it's something to allow for children to feel seen, for them to feel like, they're not as different maybe as their peers. And each book is a child who is part of a fourth grade classroom. That child will be shown throughout all of the books and will basically tell their own story. They'll try to understand their purpose. Is it this or is it that? They'll have a conflict. They'll have a lot of learning experience. And then at the end, they're restating that to really start to understand maybe what some of that means. And so, things like school drills, that's a topic, ADHD, autism, giftedness, even executive functioning skills. I have one for Down syndrome, bullying. Bullying is actually one of the first ones that comes out. And there are discussion questions at the end, as well as a glossary of terms. To your point, they might say, what is ADHD? What is neurodivergency? What is sensory processing disorder? But for those who have read it, I've had many psychologists and OTs in the schools, principals, social emotional learning coaches who are within the school system read them. And what they've said is, I saw myself in this book and I saw my son or daughter in the other book. And so that is the key takeaway. And I think too, of especially knowing myself, with that ADHD brain, having that visualization that really brings the emotion in those characters to life is extremely helpful. And I like to digest information in small quantities. And so for me, I listen to self-help, and I read fiction because I'm going to have to get fully ingrained in the novel. It's difficult for me to try to read a self-help book. So if it was done in a format that is easily digestible, I think it is something too that could be really beneficial for those who are not elementary school ages. It could lead into middle school and high school and adult ages as well.
Dr. Seuss for grownups. Okay.
Exactly.
We all need it. Okay, so folks, you might want to check out the Purposefully Me series. Yet, Sarah, you have a method that you teach that I'm sure shows up somehow in the books as well. You call it, I believe it's the Align parenting method. Did I get that correct?
You did. That is correct.
Okay. And I love acronyms. So I know Align is going to stand for something probably, or something along that area that helps us. Talk about this method that you have that our audience can pay attention to, because folks, this is legacy, right? How many people are teaching things that their parents taught them? What if you were teaching your kids the things that they grow up teaching their kids to help keep it going? And these were grandma's lessons or grandpa's lessons. Let's talk about this Align parenting method, because I think with a little twist, it's the Align business method, and you could be teaching it to entrepreneurs everywhere and writing a Dr. Seuss grown-up book.
Absolutely. So I love that you mentioned hearing that from our grandparents. And I think that's where there's a little voice in our head of no matter where our frustration is coming from, maybe it's coming from our child or maybe it's coming from a colleague. These are the moments where you're trying not to lose your shit. That's the bottom line. This is what the Align method is here to help. And sometimes you'll start to hear that inner voice, which might be an inner voice from your grandparents, from your parents, from somebody else who's maybe not you, that's causing you to react a certain way in a situation where, if you were to sit down later and you're not in that fight or flight mode, you would think, okay, I would prefer to be calm, or I would have preferred to answer in this manner. And so that's where the Align method really comes into play. So I'll walk through and say what each letter in the acronym means, and then I can give you a scenario as well.
Perfect. So what I'm hearing is this Align method is, your kids are driving you up the wall and you're about to snap. A client, a colleague, that person on hold at Comcast who you just want to reach through the phone and smack them. There are many applications for the Align method that you have. You just call it the Align parenting method, which immediately makes our brain think, oh, it's only for us and kids. Yet this could apply to every area where we're in a high stress situation.
Absolutely. And I think that you can use that word parenting in two ways. One, parenting your children, but two, a lot of us are trying to overcome trauma that we had as children. And so we're parenting ourselves in a way, and we are learning these types of skills to allow for us to remain calm that we never had given to us. And so even if you don't have children, in a way, you're trying to parent yourself so that you have less reactions or reactivity in high stress situations.
Okay, I hear from a lot of people about childhood trauma, things like that. I know plenty of people who've had. So I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to shout out to my mom, one of our 4 listeners that we know is out there. My dad's passed, yet to mom. I must have had amazing parents. I have no childhood trauma that either that or it is so buried, so deep within me that if I went to therapy, oh my God, who knows who I would become? I would destroy the world if it was unleashed or something. Yet, mom, good job, because I don't think I have any childhood trauma. I think I had one hell of a childhood. So for everybody else out there who has childhood trauma, let's talk about the Align method that you've got, Sarah.
Yes. And, it can be, when you think about childhood trauma, something simple. My parents are incredible as well. And that day and time, though, there was just a different way of parenting. We didn't quite open up to our parents and talk about everything, even though we had that philosophy in our household of, as long as you tell the truth, you're not in trouble. And I remember some specific examples where I just came home and told the truth, even though I was in trouble for going to a party or whatever it was at an early age. And they said, all right. I said, can I still go to that concert? They're like, yeah, you can. So, while having those great relationships, there still may have been some conflicts at school. I was bullied between really 6th and 8th grade, that middle school time frame where you just look awkward. I'm very tall. I have large feet and was very thin. So, that kind of thing can stick with you, and you can watch as the older you get, you don't know where some of that stuff might show up. It might show up in a way that you never thought it would. You thought you were over that. And then somehow, all of a sudden, your blood is starting to boil and you might be triggered. And maybe that's by a colleague who maybe reminds you of that bully at that point, or the way that they're speaking to you, or maybe they're leveraging a tone that a teacher or a coach used with you that you just didn't like. And so that's where Align comes in. You have the A for awareness. L is listen and label. G, or excuse me, ALI, having a moment here. I is for identify, you're identifying triggers. G is for grounding. And N is for nurture. And so the way that you walk through that, when I say awareness is really, how is your body feeling in that moment? Not saying what the feeling is, but what is the sensation? Is it that my chest is really tight? My fists are starting to ball up. Maybe I'm sweating. Maybe my heart is racing. So there are some of those physical cues that you're given when you're starting to become frustrated or overwhelmed or just heightened in a situation. And so you really take your brain essentially out of where you're just living, and you're doing your thing to fully becoming aware and noticing what are those sensations in your body. The next thing you do is listen. You're listening to yourself, and then you're labeling. So whether it is your child that's triggering, or maybe it's someone that you're working with, and this could even go if it's one of your employees, maybe they're really frustrated about something and they're starting to trigger you as well. So you can say, I'm becoming really frustrated right now. You're really labeling and naming what that emotion is. Identifying what that trigger is the next step that I think is extremely important, because why is it happening? We all have to be curious. Like, I don't think any of us are just flying off the handle or yelling at people or losing our shit just because, there's typically a reason behind it. Maybe it is that you are completely overwhelmed. It's been a long day. Maybe you're hungry. I can get very hangry, I know, or thirsty. There's very simple things that it could be that's causing this, or it could be this employee or this, a teammate who is constantly complaining about the same thing, and you just want it to go away. And so you're identifying that trigger for you, and even holding that empathy for someone else and identifying what could that trigger be for them. Maybe they've got something else going on. I think that's something I always try to tell my children. If someone is mean, you think about what might be going on in their household, You never know what kind of day they've had. You have no idea. So identifying those triggers, and then next, doing a simple grounding exercise. So that could be anything from taking a sip of water that resets your central nervous system. Working out, as we've talked before. You could name 3 things that are yellow. If you're sitting at your desk, you can stare at an object in the distance for 10 seconds to kind of brings that focal point in. So that all brings you back to your body and really grounds you in where you are. So you're not only just becoming aware of the situation, now you're actually doing something about it, and you're using a tool and technique to bring you back to that grounding point. And then last is nurture. We all make mistakes. We all blow up. I think it's so important to give yourself some grace sometimes and say, oh man, that was a really hard moment for me. I'm still a good person. I'm a good parent. I'm a good employee. I'm a good boss, whatever it might be. You have to hold that empathy for yourself, because you cannot have empathy and be angry at the same time. So those 2 things really go hand in hand. Or you're having empathy for the other person. So if it's your child, you can have them mirror your emotions. You can walk through this with them. All of this in the moment, and when you practice it, can take less than 60 seconds. It's something that you could even do at your desk. There are things, maybe you're on a call and you can, tap on both sides of your chest, like where you're crossing your arms, you're tapping a little bit on your right where your collarbone is, and tapping a little bit on your left. So there are things, if you just kind of placing both feet on the ground, you're really starting to wiggle your toes, or you're moving your hands and you're pulling your focus to where your toes and hands are. So these are very simple things that you figure out what works for you. And you can even write a list, put that on a Post-it note, put it right next to your desk, and make sure that you are practicing that throughout the day, or even take a moment and put that on your calendar to get up and move and practice some of those grounding tools.
Okay. So folks, the next time you're about to blow up, right? The next time you find yourself in one of those situations, run the align method, which is awareness. That's always step number 1. How many times do we find ourselves halfway down the hole that we fell into before we're even aware that we're falling, right? It's have that awareness, listen and label, identify, ground, and then nurture. That would be the align method. Now, I'm going to take Sarah in a different direction. I get to do this when Bob's not here and has a question, and he would be going and taking us all through it. So if you want to talk to Sarah more about this, if you want to learn more about this, she gave you the website. It's sarahlewishartley.com. No H on Sarah. Save it for the Hartley. Okay. And it's Hartley with a T, H-A-R-T, not heart like the thing in your chest, Hartley.com. You can connect to Sarah or following her on Instagram at Sarah Lewis Hartley. Now, Sarah, you and I were talking before the call. One of the things, and you mentioned as it went along, was that you battle Lyme disease. And you also mentioned a few times through this that you understand ADHD because you battle through that. So our audience probably doesn't understand, if they thankfully don't suffer from Lyme disease, they probably don't understand. And I don't want to necessarily turn this into a science and medical clinic, yet you're basically fighting like illness or something at almost every moment of your life, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So folks, just so you get it, right? Sarah, we're sorry that you have it. And I'm sure there's a interesting story how you ended up. And it probably took a long time for the doctors to diagnose it because they kept thinking it was this and then that and then the other thing, because that's what happens with Lyme disease. Yet ADHD is more where I'd like to focus, because I think half the listeners out there would claim they are. And they might be. I'm not judging who they are and who isn't. There might be people who claim I'm not, and they actually are. Who knows? Yet it's a fairly common. I remember going through school, so at our age, ADD was a big thing back then, and you had, what is ADHD, and how does an entrepreneur succeed in their chosen path as a leader, business builder, all those things, while dealing with ADHD?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. And I think you're probably right. There are probably many out there who either one have diagnosed themselves and, maybe haven't even seen a doctor, but have that assumption, or those who haven't and are maybe not realizing it. And there are several characteristics of having ADHD that are pretty typical across the board. And
Okay, let's see if I have it. Go. What are they?
So one is time blindness. So in a situation where 15 minutes to you at one point could either mean that it is nothing and it flies by, or you are so fully ingrained in something that you are constantly late and you're having difficulty shifting tasks from one to another because you're fully hyper focusing. But becomes an issue. A lot of people who have ADHD are late. I am one who is always on time. I am always exactly on time because I am doing the millions of things until I possibly have to stop. And then I'm rushing out the door, but I'm always rushing no matter where I'm going. Another one is decision fatigue. So there becomes a point where you have made so many decisions throughout the day that you just can't do it anymore. I am probably a joy to be on a girls' trip because at that point, I've made all the decisions for my children. I've made all the decisions at work, and I don't care what we do. It's like, as long as I don't have to plan this and really tell you exactly what I want to do, I'm there. I'll just show up. I'll have a great time. I'm there for the fun. I don't need to be the one who is adamant about us doing specific things.
So you going to the Cheesecake Factory and them handing you that menu is like your worst nightmare.
Oh my God, it's so overwhelming. Can't go there. There's 7,000 things on the menu.
Yes.
I mean, that is completely overwhelming. A lot of times there are sensory sensitivities with ADHD. And so it could be that you just become overwhelmed by lights, or you become overwhelmed by sound. And that happens to change as you get older as well. And so I know for women, there is an element of perimenopause that once you start getting into that actually exacerbates some of your symptoms. And so for me, even though I've always had ADHD, I love concerts. Like, I have many bands that I have seen and followed throughout the years that I absolutely love. But yet, now there is some element of noise and sound that does really affect me and does really bother me. So there are a lot of these key characteristics. Some is interrupting. You might have that friend who cannot wait to respond. They might be responding halfway through the thought that you're trying to get out, and they already know what you're going to say. Typically, a person with ADHD, a good analogy would be, it's a Ferrari brain with bicycle brakes. It is going 100 miles an hour at all time, and you have a very difficult time stopping it, which can also lead to sleep issues. So a lot of times that goes hand in hand, of whether you can't fall asleep because your brain is just constantly on, or you can't stay asleep. So sleep issues. There are so many different characteristics that come into play, but it's also at the same time brilliant. A lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of professional athletes all have ADHD. Michael Jordan, Simone Biles, Michael Phelps, very highly intelligent people, because a lot of those who maybe went misdiagnosed or didn't realize it in childhood because they did really well, it's because their IQ is actually extremely high. And so, those who are in the 99th percentile for IQ, they're gifted. And when you're both gifted and have ADHD, the terminology is twice exceptional. And so that's a term that most people have never heard of. They don't really understand that, but they may think, I don't have ADHD because I'm not the kid that was in class disrupting and that did really bad on tests. There is definitely a myth around what we think ADHD looks like from the hyperactivity side of things. I actually always thought I wasn't hyperactive. I thought it must have just been because I did really well on tests. I internalized a lot. I wasn't diagnosed until 25. I actually self-diagnosed, took a quiz online, then went to my doctor, was given medicine, said, be on your way. But what I found now is it's a totally different animal of what ADHD actually means and how it presents. And I thought I was maybe inattentive. Realized recently I am hyperactive, but my brain is hyperactive. My body is not. So while I wasn't the kid who was bouncing off the walls, I still did play sports, and it was, 80s and 90s. So I was running around outside and always on a team, and, left after dark and, left until dark. It came home on my bike. And so I always had that constant dopamine that was hitting my brain because I was constantly running and exercising. And so in class, I was able to sit still. So it's just a different way to look at it of, it might be something that you never thought about. And now here we are.
Okay. So whether we have it or we don't have it, the lessons will still be powerful for us. How does an entrepreneur that does have it still succeed in a world where someone's telling them they need to sit down and focus and do something for 2 hours, and they're like, that's like their worst nightmare, right? Or do the same thing again and again and again and again repetitively, which someone with ADHD from mine, right? They want this, they want that. They don't want to be trapped in a box. They don't want that schedule. That's not going to necessarily. How does an entrepreneur succeed in this world with ADHD?
I think that's why they're entrepreneurs. Quite honestly, I think about the tabs that you have open on your desktop, within Google Chrome. There might be millions. There's typically a lot more for those who have ADHD. And that is how our brain functions. You have got constant tabs that are always open at all times. And like you said, that's how I found out I had it. I had gone to school for landscape architecture. I had to sit behind a desk by myself in this old historic building in Savannah, Georgia, and I was bored to tears. So a lot of entrepreneurs do have ADHD because they want to dabble in everything. They want to be one who knows many things, that they want to not pigeonhole themselves into just one thing. And that's how a lot of times you thrive in that type of chaos. And the other is you find what you really love to do. Because a lot of times you're labeled as lazy, but that's just because that person hasn't found what works for them. And when you find it and you're like, this is awesome. This is the thing that I really like to do. It drives me. It fuels my fire. All of that. That's truly when when you bridge together the ADHD and that career path, that's when it takes off, because the ADHD mind is also very creative. It is constantly thinking about what's next, and you're able to be a visionary and think long term and think ahead and create this real viewpoint of what the future might hold, and really even get to that point of starting those businesses. If it's something that you kind of started and then it never took off, it's because you didn't really love it and you found it boring. And those with ADHD do become bored very quickly.
Sounds to me like I want it if I don't have it. I don't know if I have it, I don't have it. Some of the things you were saying as indicators, I'm like, that's me. Some of the things I was like, nope, that one's not me. Yet you're making it almost sound good, Sarah. You're making it sound like, yeah, I want that because I'll just keep bouncing. And then when I find the thing, look out world. Folks, do you have it? I don't know. And that's going to be for each of you to decide, do you have it, to go get tested for it, the ultimate thing I gather from what I've heard you saying today and dopamine is the true medication that we're always all looking for. The question is, can you find a way to create that dopamine hit regularly for yourself? And that's a challenge ADHD people usually have. Yes.
And as you said before, exercise is the number one way to get that dopamine naturally.
Perfect. And that is a wonderful way to wrap it all up, folks. Go exercise, right? I'm going to give Sarah another minute. Yet, folks, that's it, right? And Bob would have fought that the whole way. Yet we know it, right? It's a great way to get the dopamine hit. It's a great, great way. Now, you know that I love all of you, and my exercise might not be your exercise, right? That might just be a walk up a hill near you. That might be an intense walk with your dog who wants to go really fast. That might be with your kids, with your family, on your own. It might be on a Peloton, lifting heavy weights. I don't know what workout means, yet it's going to be something that will definitely bring dopamine into your world, which will help you through the day. All right, Sarah, I'm going to give you the last minute. Give you a minute to think about it. I'll plug some stuff over here for you. Yet I want you to have 1 minute. What do you want to say, either again that we've heard or that did not get asked and talked about, so you leave our audience with it? Folks, her website is sarahlewishartley.com. Check it out. You can find out more about the aligned parenting method. You can find out about the books. Follow her on Instagram at Sarah Lewis Hartley, where you'll get even more information about that as well. All right, I've stalled for you long enough, Sarah. I'm going to put 1 minute on the clock maximum. Repeat something that they have to hear or something we did not talk about. What do you want them to all know as they walk away from this episode?
I love that you said I'm making it sound like it's this wonderful thing. I think it has all neurodiversity and ADHD, which I am the most familiar with because I personally have ADHD, is something that can be a blessing and a curse. And I think there are so many stigmas around it that it causes for others to maybe judge or have this certain perspective of you. And so I think that if you go along that journey, or if you're just starting it, or if you're if you've known for a long time, trying to hold empathy for those around you and just understanding what that difference might be. And that difference might not be neurodiversity. There is just such an element of compassion that we can lend to one another that makes us better entrepreneurs, makes us better business people, makes us better friends and parents, makes us better family members. If we can just hold space for other people and have that time to reset ourselves, and there's no one else we can control. Yourself is the only person that you can do that for. And so if you can do that, then you'll start to see the world change a little bit around you. If you hold that moment of compassion for others, maybe they are going through something similar. Maybe they do have all these strong characteristics that you haven't seen yet. I think that's something that could go a long way and could really help just, in the current state of where we all are as a country.
Okay. Forget as a world. Sarah, we appreciate you taking the time joining us today, folks. Hopefully you got something for you, something for maybe a relationship with your kids, a conversation to have, whatever it might be. You can always find her, like I said, sarahlewishartley.com. Check the show notes if you want that. Sarah, we really appreciate you taking the time joining me and our audience here at We Make Give. Bob, we hope you were listening. Until our next episode, as always, do good.